So he thinks he knows better than the gods.
And you know the minds of the gods, Lord? Galahad asked.
I believe the gods hate to be bored, so I do my best to amuse them. That way they smile on me. Your god, Merlin said sourly, despises amusement, demanding grovelling worship instead. He must be a very sorry creature. He's probably rather like Gorfethid, endlessly suspicious and foully jealous of his reputation. Aren't you both lucky that I was here? He grinned at us, suddenly and mischievously, and I saw how much he had enjoyed his public humiliation of Gorfethid. Part of Merlin's reputation was made by his performances. Some druids, like Iorwerth, worked quietly. Others, like Tanaburs, relied on a sinister wiliness. But Merlin liked to dominate and dazzle, and humbling an ambitious king was as pleasurable to him as it was instinctive. "Is Cynwyn really blessed?" I asked him. He looked astonished at my unexpected question. "Why should it matter to you?" "But she's a pretty girl, and I confess that pretty girls are a weakness of mine, so I shall weave her a charm of bliss." "I did the same for you once, Derval, though not because you are pretty." He laughed, then glanced through the window to judge the length of the sun's shadow. "I must be on my way soon." "What brought you here, Lord?" Galahad asked. "I needed to talk to Iorwerth," Merlin said, looking around to make sure that he had collected all his belongings. "He might be a bumbling idiot, but he does possess the odd scrap of knowledge I might have momentarily forgotten. He proved knowledgeable about the Ring of Elunud. I have it somewhere." He patted the pocket sewn into the lining of his robe. "Well, I did have it," he said carelessly, though I suspected the indifference was merely a pretense. "What is the Ring of Elunud?" Galahad asked. Merlin scowled at my friend's ignorance, then decided to indulge it. "The Ring of Elunud," he announced grandly, "is one of the 13 treasures of Britain. We've always known about the treasures, of course. At least those of us who recognize the true gods," he added pointedly, glancing at Galahad. "But none of us were sure what their real power was." "And the scroll told you?" I asked. Merlin smiled wolfishly. His long white hair was neatly bound in black ribbon at the back of his neck, while his beard was plaited in tight pigtails. "The scroll," he said, "confirmed everything I either suspected or knew, and it even suggested 1 or 2 new scraps of knowledge. Ah, here it is." He had been searching his pockets for the ring, which he now produced. To me, the treasure looked like any ordinary warrior's ring made of iron, but Merlin held it in his palm as though it was the greatest jewel of Britain. "The Ring of Elunud," Merlin said, "forged in the other world at the beginning of time. Piece of metal, really. Nothing special." He tossed it to me, and I made a hasty catch. "By itself," Merlin said, "the ring has no power. None of the treasures has power by themselves. The mantle of invisibility won't make you invisible, any more than the horn of Bran Galad sounds any better than any other hunting horn. Oh, by the way, Derval, did you fetch Nimue?" "Yes." "Well done. I thought you would. Interesting place, the Isle of the Dead, don't you think? I go there when I need some stimulating company. Where was I? Oh, yes, the treasures. Worthless rubbish, really. You wouldn't give the coat of Padern to a beggar, not if you were kind, yet it's still one of the treasures." "Then what use are they?" Galahad asked. He had taken the ring from me, but now handed it back to the druid. "They command the gods, of course," Merlin snapped, as though the answer should have been obvious. "By themselves they're tawdry nothings, but put them all together and you can have the gods hopping like frogs. It isn't enough just to gather the treasures, of course," he added hastily. "There are 1 or 2 other rituals that are needed, and who knows if it will all work. No one has ever tried, so far as I know. Is Nimue well?" he asked me earnestly. "She is now." "You sound resentful. You think I should have gone to fetch her?" "My dear Derval, I am quite busy enough without running around Britain after Nimue. If the girl can't cope with the Isle of the Dead, then what earthly use is she?" "She could have died," I accused him, thinking of the ghouls and cannibals of the Isle.
Of course she could. What's the point of an ordeal if there's no danger?
You do have infantile ideas, Derval. Merlin shook his head pityingly, then slipped the ring onto one of his long, bony fingers. He stared solemnly at us, and we each waited awestruck for some manifestation of supernatural power. But after a few ominous seconds, Merlin just laughed at our expressions.
"I told you," he said. "The treasures are nothing special."
"How many of the treasures do you have?"
Galahad asked.
"Several,"
Merlin answered evasively.
"But even if I had 12 of the 13, I would still be in trouble, unless I could find the 13th. And that, Derval, is the missing treasure. The cauldron of Clithno Ethin. Without the cauldron, we are lost."
"We're lost anyway," I said bitterly. Merlin peered at me as though I were being particularly obtuse.
"The war,"
he said after a few seconds.
"Is that why you came here? To plead for peace? Oh, what fools the two of you are. Gorfethid doesn't want peace. The man's a brute. He has the brains of an ox, and a not very clever ox at that. He wants to be High King, which means he has to rule Dumnonia."
"He says he'll leave Mordred on the throne," Galahad said.
"Of course he says that," Merlin said scornfully. "What else would he say? But the minute he gets his hands on that wretched child's neck, he'll wring it like a chicken. And a good thing, too."
"You want Gorfethid to win?" I asked, appalled. He sighed.
Derval, he said. "You're so like Arthur. You think the world is simple, that good is good and bad is bad, that up is up and down is down. You ask what I want. I tell you what I want. I want the 13 treasures, and I shall use them to bring the gods back to Britain, and then I shall command them to restore Britain to the blessed condition it enjoyed before the Romans came. No more Christians."
He pointed a finger at Galahad.
"And no Mithraists either."
He pointed at me.
"Just the people of the gods in the country of the gods. That, Derval, is what I want."
"Then what of Arthur?" I asked.
"What of him? He's a man. He's got a sword. He can look after himself. Fate is inexorable, Derval. If fate means Arthur to win this war, then it doesn't matter if Gorfethid masses the armies of the world against him. If I had nothing better to do, then I confess I would help Arthur, because I like him. But fate has decreed that I am an old man, increasingly feeble and possessed of a bladder like a leaking water-skin, and I must therefore husband my waning energies."
He proclaimed this pathetic state in a vigorous tone.
"Even I cannot win Arthur's wars, heal Nemui's mind, and discover the treasures all at the same time. Of course, if I find that saving Arthur's life helps me find the treasures, then be assured I shall come to the battle. But otherwise—"
He shrugged as though the war was of no importance to him. Nor, I suppose, was it. He turned to the small window and peered at the 3 stakes that had been erected in the compound.
"You'll stay to see the formalities, I hope?"
"Should we?" I asked.
"Of course you should, if Gorfethid allows you. All experience is useful, however ugly. I've performed the rites often enough, so I won't stay to be amused, but be assured you will be safe here. I shall turn Gorfethid into a slug if he touches a hair of your foolish heads. But for now I have to go. Eorwith thinks there's an old woman on the Demetian border who might remember something useful. If she's alive, of course, and kept her memory. Oh, I do hate talking to old women. They're so grateful for company that they never stop chattering, and never keep to the subject either. What a prospect. Tell Nimue I look forward to seeing her."
And with those words he was out of the door and striding across the fort's inner compound. The sky clouded that afternoon, and a grey, ugly drizzle soaked the fort before evening. The druid Eorwith came to us and assured us we were safe, but tactfully suggested that we would strain Gorfethid's reluctant hospitality if we attended the evening's feast that marked the last gathering of Gorfethid's allies and chiefs before the men at Caer Seuss marched south to join the rest of the army at Branuginium. We assured Eorwith we had no wish to attend the feast. The druid smiled his thanks, then sat on a bench beside the door.
You're friends of Merlin? He asked.
Lord Derval is, Galahad said. Iorwerth rubbed his eyes tiredly. He was old, with a friendly, mild face and a bald head, on which a ghost of a tonsure showed just above each ear.
I cannot help thinking, he said, that my brother Merlin expects too much of the gods. He believes the world can be made anew, and that history can be rubbed out like a line drawn in the mud. Yet it isn't so.
He scratched at a louse in his beard, then looked at Galahad, who wore a cross about his neck. He shook his head.
I envy your Christian God. He is three, and he is one. He is dead, and he is alive. He is everywhere, and he is nowhere, and he demands that you worship him, but claims nothing else is worthy of worship. There's room in those contradictions for a man to believe in anything or nothing. But not with our gods. They are like kings, fickle and powerful, and if they want to forget us, they do. It doesn't matter what we believe, only what they want. Our spells only work when the gods permit. Merlin disagrees, of course. He thinks that if we shout loud enough, we'll get their attention. But what do you do to a child who shouts?
Give it attention, I suggested.
You hit it, Lord Derval, Iorwerth said. You hit it until it is quiet. I fear Lord Merlin may shout too loud for too long.
He stood and picked up his staff.
I apologize that you cannot eat with the warriors tonight, but the Princess Cheleth says you are very welcome to dine with her household.
Cheleth of Elmet was the wife of Kynaglas, and her invitation was not necessarily a compliment. Indeed, the invitation could have been a measured insult devised by Gorfethid to imply that we were only fit to dine with women and children. But Galahad said we would be honoured to accept. And there, in Cheleth's small hall, was Ceinwen. I had wanted to see her again. I had wanted it ever since Galahad had first ventured the suggestion that he make an embassy to Powys, and that was why I had made such strenuous efforts to accompany him. I had not come to Caer Sws to make peace, but to see Ceinwen's face again. And now, in the flickering rushlight of Cheleth's hall, I saw her. The years had not changed her. Her face was as sweet, her manner as demure, her hair as bright and her smile as lovely. When we entered the room, she was fussing with a small child, trying to feed him scraps of apple. The child was Kynaglas's son, Perthel.
"I've told him if he won't eat his apple, then the horrid Unknownians will take him away," she said with a smile. "I think he must want to go with you, for he won't eat a thing."
Cheleth of Elmet, Perthel's mother, was a tall woman with a heavy jaw and pale eyes. She made us welcome, ordering a maidservant to pour us mead, then introduced us to two of her aunts, Tonwyn and Elsel, who looked at us resentfully. We had evidently interrupted a conversation they were relishing, and the aunts' sour glances suggested we should leave, but Cheleth was more generous.
"Do you know the Princess Ceinwen?" she asked us.
Galahad bowed to her, then squatted beside Perthel. He always liked children, who in turn trusted him on sight. Before a moment had passed, the two princes were playing with the apple scraps as though they were foxes, with Perthel's mouth the fox's den and Galahad's fingers the hounds chasing the fox. The pieces of apple disappeared.
"Why didn't I think of that?"
Ceinwen asked. "Because you weren't raised by Galahad's mother, lady," I said, "who doubtless fed him in the same way. To this day he can't eat unless someone sounds a hunting horn." She laughed, then caught sight of the brooch I wore. She caught her breath, coloured, and for an instant I thought I had made a huge mistake. Then she smiled.
"I should remember you, Lord Derval."
"No, lady,